Hi art students, today I'm going to show you how to make a printmaking design, and we are going to be creating eventually a stamp. This is an example of a printmaking stamp, and it's carved into this soft block, easy cut linoleum is what they call that. And then I'll show you how you can print that onto a piece of paper and get multiple prints. So this was kind of like a flame design that I did, and I printed it in a shade of blue. Now, before you can actually create your stamp, you need to create some designs. Okay, for this project, I want you to think of a symbol that could represent either you, your family, or your interests. And when we talk about symbols in art, we're talking about using an image that, without any words at all, could represent something bigger. A few easy examples of symbols. Many people know that when you see a heart, that's meant to represent love, right? If you see a dove, that's meant to represent peace. Of course, we also know that countries and religions can use symbols to express larger ideas about them, either that country or that religion. So symbols are all around us, and I'm asking you to think about what are some things that would symbolize you or tell somebody something about you or your family. So what I did for starters was I just folded that paper. This is our rough draft paper. I always like to start with some rough drafts. I just folded that in half because that gives me 4 sections to work. Now, something I want to caution you against, notice that your rough drafts are actually going to be bigger than your final draft. And the reason that matters is the more details you put into your rough draft, that means you'll have to cram them in here, but the smaller and more squished together those details become, which can make things a little bit difficult once you start carving. Okay, so first of all, I want you to take a moment to start thinking about some symbols that you may draw, and then I'm going to just go ahead and do a time lapse of me drawing some of my symbols. Okay, so there I've drawn 4 totally different symbols that represent maybe different things about me as a person. And let me try to just explain my thought process here. So I'll actually start with the last one that I did. So sometimes a symbol is meant to be a very simple image that represents a very big idea. And some of you might be thinking, why on earth would Mr. Anderson choose an elephant to represent himself? He lives in Minnesota. There aren't any elephants here. Well, I was thinking about there's a phrase that says, elephants never forget. And sometimes elephants are an animal that are often associated with wisdom or being knowledgeable. And that's something that I really value. I love to learn new things. So I decided that I would choose an elephant to represent myself. Sometimes animals can represent certain things. People often think of dogs as representing loyalty or friendship. Maybe you think you're a good friend. Maybe a dog would be an excellent symbol for you, even if you don't own a dog. The rest of these are a little bit more literal or tell you very specific things about me. I chose an outdoor scene because I love camping. I love being outside with my family. I showed this paint palette because this is kind of a commonly recognized symbol for art, even though there's lots of types of art that I like to make. Clay, drawing, painting is one of those things. And oftentimes with symbols, simple is better. If I would try to cram every little thing in here, clay tools, pencils for drawing, painting stuff for painting, printmaking tools for printmaking, this would become a very messy and not a very effective symbol, especially when you have to fit it on something small like this. And then a book there, because that's one of my favorite things to do too. I love reading. And that symbol actually kind of goes along with the idea behind that one, is that I love learning new things. I love gaining knowledge. What I'm going to do is give you time right now to make your symbols, and go ahead and try a bunch of different things out. Okay, even if you're not quite sure how it'll turn out, that's the point of a rough draft, is so we get our ideas out on the page. Okay, fold your rough draft paper and try drawing 4 different symbols that could represent you or your family. Once you're happy with at least one of the 4 symbols that you drew, then what you will do is you'll show this piece of paper to your teacher, and we will make sure that you are set up with one of these pieces of soft block linoleum to first draw your design onto. One thing to keep in mind, I can only give you one of these. So if you make a mistake on one side, go ahead and use the back side, but after that, you'll just have to try to work around any mistakes that you might have. So either side works just as good as the other. Okay, this might also be a good time right now for me to remind you to put your name on the back. So if you haven't done that yet, please do that, because at the end of class today, we're going to put these 2 things together, and that'll help us keep track of your project. Okay, I'm going to actually do the very last one that I came up with. This is a symbol that represents a whole lot about me versus maybe just one specific character trait. So I'm going to go ahead and do that elephant symbol for mine. Here we go. All right, so as you can see, drawing your image onto the soft block linoleum really doesn't take much time, especially since it's a really small area. We're just using a regular pencil for that. So nothing special about the tools we're using there. One thing I should point out is I actually simplified my design from this to this, and I actually started with a fairly simple design there. One thing to keep in mind about printmaking is that it tends to reward people who are minimalists, or people who know that sometimes in a really good design, you don't need to overwhelm your picture with a lot of stuff. Okay, the reason for that is, number one, you're going to have to cut this out with a carving tool, which is much less precise than a pencil. Okay, so simple will make your job easier when you're carving. The reason number two, I'll go back to this first one I showed you. Everything you make is going to get printed with ink onto paper, and no matter how careful you are, sometimes there's a little bit of that paper that can show through. And so for that reason, designs that are kind of more chunky in their line quality, or have fewer lines that are really close together, tend to print in a much more clear, much more easy way to identify. You can take a little bit of time to work on your stamp, and in just a moment I'll show you how to carve those out. Now is the time to finish any rough drafts you're still working on, and then transfer or redraw your rough draft onto a block of linoleum for your final draft. Okay, so now I have drawn my stamp on here, and you can see that my work area looks a little bit different now. That's because I have put this bench hook, you can say bench hook, I've put that right on my work area. Now the way a bench hook is designed, it actually doesn't matter which way goes where, but it's designed so that you press that up against the table surface and just holds right in place there, and it creates a little bit of a work area where you're not going to accidentally damage the table. You don't want that sitting up there, because that'll kind of create a ramp, which we don't want. It just goes right up against the table. Perfect. Now when I'm carving, a couple of things to know. You have a few different blades that you can use, and this is what your carving tool looks like. But I would say for most people, you want the 3-blade, okay? So the 3-blade is a V-shaped blade. There, you can get a good look at it. And if you look really closely, it's got that number 3 right on the back there, okay? If you ever have to switch blades and take blades out, I'm happy to show you how to do that. In fact, I'd love to do the first one with you. But the way that works is you just loosen that up, okay? Then you can feel that blade gets wiggly as you loosen it. You don't want to loosen it all the way, because this piece will actually totally pop off if you go too far, until that can slide out. Now, if you look inside of there, there's kind of a ball shape, and then there's that little kind of frowny face piece of metal right over the top of it. And when I'm putting my blades in, there's the sharp blade side, and then there's that kind of dull, spoony looking side there. And that spoony side just goes right in there. Yes, really technical terms. Spoony side and sharp side. Okay, now I get that nice and tight. I'm going to say for just about everyone in here, the 3-blade is going to be the blade that you want to use. And the best place to start with that 3-blade is just to start tracing the lines that you've drawn. Now, a couple things to note. These are sharp. They can hurt you if you're not careful with them, okay? So for that reason, you always carve away from your hand and away from your body. If I have a hand right here and I'm carving, there's a chance I could slip and I could get my thumb. And we don't want that to happen, okay? Also, there's never a reason to carve towards yourself because you can always turn your image, okay, to carve it wherever you need to carve it. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm right-handed, so I'm holding it in my right hand. This is another part to really focus on. This is rounded, so it fits right in the palm of your hand. And my thumb goes right on top. Okay, I'm gripping it just like that. My thumb basically points the way. The other thing to keep in mind, there's a gutter, and then there's the part where it kind of bows up, right? You should be able to see the scraps of linoleum carving into the gutter. So the same way that you wouldn't hold a spoon upside down when you're eating your cereal, you don't want to hold your blade upside down. You want to rotate that so you can see the dish there, see the gutter. So here I go. Got it in my hand, gripped, my thumb is right on top. My left hand is holding my linoleum in place while my right hand is carving in a way where it could not possibly cut into my left hand. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm turning it as I go. That's how you work this. It's really actually no different than cutting with scissors. When I get to a spot right there where I want to stop, I just stop. Sometimes the linoleum might rip away on its own. Sometimes you might want to just peel that away by just giving that a little tug, okay? That is a skinny piece of linoleum. I didn't carve that much away, but it's enough to make a difference in my stamp, okay? As long as you can see that line clearly, it was cut deep enough. There's really nothing gained by going too deep other than you start to weaken your stamp, okay? I'm gonna time-lapse the rest of this. All right, so there I've carved on top of every single line on my elephant, okay? It didn't take me too long, and so there's really, just so you know, there's really nothing gained by rushing this process, and that could be good as it is. If I really wanted to, you know, I do have room to maybe add some type of a ground line underneath my elephant. If you finish early and you think you have time to add some tiny details, you can. But there's really no need to. This could be good totally on its own. And I did all of that with that 3-blade that was already in here. So as you're carving today, just a reminder, remember how you grip it. That round part sits in the palm of your hand. Your thumb is right on top, pointing in the same direction as the blade. Just like how you wouldn't hold a spoon upside down, you want to make sure that gutter is facing up. And you should always carve away from yourself and never towards your own hand or towards your own body, okay? And keeping it on top of that bench hook the whole time. So good luck with your carving. Now is the time for students to carve their design into the linoleum.